on the first two podcasts, we looked at the overview of the art of the turnaround, how to revive a company that's going to the wall, and the three pillars, which Mike says are absolutely essential to bring to a turnaround: the pursuit of happiness, elimination of constraints, and mentoring. How do you, wearing that trauma surgeon's hat, spot a dying company?
First, you do what traditionally was called forensic accounting, where you actually dig underneath the numbers to see where things actually are. You look at what resources they have, what is available, what is the pending doom. Is it a major customer canceling all their orders? Is it a supplier putting them on COD?
COD.
Cash on delivery. So when you deliver a product, you have to pay cash. You don't get any terms. Where the bank is on this, whether they're going to renew a line of credit or not, or even demand that the credit they've given you, you pay back. So there are a number of symptom indicators that give you an idea of how serious it is, but how close to the edge it is.
You have a great metaphor of the box canyon. I love that.
Yeah, the box canyon is an aviation term, and it actually applies a lot in Alaska, where someone goes for a sightseeing tour in an airplane, and it's so beautiful, and they're flying down the canyon, and the canyon, without them really recognizing, is getting narrower and narrower. And when they get to the end, the walls are getting higher and higher, and they haven't got enough room to turn around, and they haven't got enough room to climb out. So the only choice is where they crash. And companies can get themselves into a financial box canyon, and I have to try and find, almost like Houdini, a way to get them out.
They don't know they're a failing company until that point?
I think some do, and I think that's where the denial comes in. There is a way of survival if you're running a company where you don't want to confront yourself with a really disastrous situation. You want to just kick the can down the road. And you also always have a belief that something or somebody's going to bail you out.
And when a company fails, you'd assume it goes down like that. But I think you'd say it kind of goes like, in their mind, it goes like that and then suddenly falls off a cliff.
Well, there was a wonderful piece in one of Ernest Hemingway's book where the protagonist asked how this particular company went bankrupt. And the answer was, well, it was fairly slow to start with, and then it was all of a sudden. And this is what happens. The wheels completely come off. It can be seeming to the outside that everything is fine, and then suddenly events overtake it, and the whole fragility of the company then is exposed.
Is that because people are covering up? They're
Yes.
lying?
Lying is probably too aggressive a word. I think they are deceiving themselves, and by deceiving themselves, they deceive others. Normally, it's just denial, throw in a little bit of hope. Things are going to get better. We're about to get this big contract. We don't have to address all these issues. Something's going to turn out to help us avoid making the tough decisions.
But how can it be that so many agencies, both within the company and outside the company, don't see this coming?
They're all they don't want it to happen. And this is why you see things happen all of a sudden. Recently, we had a major bank go bankrupt, Silicon Bank, and everybody saw it was just fine. And then suddenly, one weekend, it went completely. There was a run on the bank, and what they hadn't anticipated was, in this day and age, a run on the bank is totally different. It was all electronic, and something like $4 to $5 billion was extracted out of the company in less than an hour. And no one had anticipated that type of run on a bank electronically. So things tend to happen very, very quickly these days. And I think that's something that we're now sort of building into the equation, that things can tip over very, very fast.
But there must be more checks and balances. There are more checks and balances in the system to stop companies failing.
You would think so, you would hope so, but banks actually don't have very good oversight.
Let's get into the first step. Step one, establish leadership. That's got to be the first thing you do.
Yes, the moment you walk in the door, it has to be a new sheriff in town. It has to be a very demonstrative change. And some of the demonstrative changes that I did was take over the current chief executive's office, and the first thing I would do is remove their desk and put in a conference table. I wanted the office to be one of communication
So the optics come into play straight away.
and people know something's different. Whenever they came into the office, the traditional desk, the pictures of the children behind the desk, it looked different. And so just a number of ways, taking down all the named parking slots. So if there was a name for a parking slot for the president, for this one, that one, I take them all down. And the new rule was the first one in got the best parking spot. And so I sort of democratized that. And just changes of, so people would know it was different.
That's interesting. So you're trying to show leadership, but at the same time you're trying to flatten the hierarchy.
Yes.
Why flatten the hierarchy?
Because a lot of people's behavior patterns are related to the hierarchy.
It was determined by legacy hierarchy.
Right, and you have to open them. You have to make them feel comfortable that you would be receptive to everybody's input, and not just listen to the senior managers who had effectively got the company in trouble in the first place.
What do you do? Do you get all the senior leadership into a room, bang their heads together? Is that one of the first things you?
No, it's one of the things. You don't bang their heads together.
But you get them all together and say, right,
Get
this
them-
is it's going to change.
There's a new sheriff in town.
Yeah.
I'm making the final decisions. I respect your input, but I might not agree with what you recommend. And but it's a new day, and we are going to turn this company around. We would like to do it with you, but if you feel uncomfortable, we'll do it without you.
What sort of reception do you get?
Sometimes really shocked. I normally hit them so hard, not in terms of verbal assault, but that this is now different. So they've been playing defense, and they've been trying to help the company survive in a lot of ways, and they haven't succeeded.
So do you do a blitzkrieg? Do you go in all guns blazing, or
No,
do you,
no.
Do you
What
go
I
in
do
softly?
is-
Or?
No, I really, once I've assessed the company, which is, from the financials and looking at it, I create a vision for them of what the future could look like.
But how do you know that future so quickly after going into the company?
Because I can describe a future with the factory being clean, the factory having new equipment, people getting pay raises, company becoming more competitive. I mean, not too specific, but somewhat generic, and just saying this is what I think the company can be, and this is the route that I think we should take. And I don't leave any doubt. Because I'm absolutely confident after I've assessed them that they are recoverable. It's a bit like a surgeon. Someone's badly injured, but they have 100% confidence they can help them survive.
I just don't understand how you can show them a roadmap right at the very outset. If you were a surgeon and you're dealing with a patient in a hell of a state, you would say after a couple of days, I think they're going to pull through. You wouldn't say it just as you're making the first incision.
You know that the human body hasn't changed. All the pieces are still in exactly the same place that they were. And my father-in-law was a surgeon, and he said, one of the wonderful things about the job is all the pieces are still in exactly the same place they were 40 years ago. All they're giving me is better equipment to find them. So you find in companies there are these commonalities that go through it. And when you look at the momentum that you can create by cosmetic change, by attitude change, by creating a vision of the future, it becomes almost part of the dynamic. Now, there are people, managers in the meeting, who are they won't believe it. And that helps you because that gives you an indication
You're sorting the sheep from the goats.
of the company Jeremiahs who don't believe that anything is possible. They've done everything they can. The company's doomed. But they really help identify in that first meeting.
So you're almost selecting who's going to go, who's going to stay.
Exactly.
How much does fear play a part in this?
I think it did a number of years ago, less so now. In the Scottish company that I bought, fear was a major, major part because the unemployment in that area was 18%.
Yes.
And if you lost that job, you probably wouldn't find another one. So that was kind of used as a leverage in the past. I think it's less so now because people have a lot more opportunities. But I think people are comfortable with the companies that they're in and they don't want to move. I mean, very few people want to actually change a company. They've got their sort of social life there, they've got their friends there, that's their sort of identity. So I think there is definitely an issue of some fear, but they also had inbuilt fear that the company wasn't going to survive. And they're getting lots of little pieces of information saying, this supplier has stopped shipment, this customer has canceled the order. So they're getting a lot of signals to create fear. And I try and assuage those fears as much as possible.
So you go in, I mean, is compassion part of your brief?
Compassion maybe is too strong a word. I think empathy.
Humanity.
Yeah, the empathy and confidence. And we come back to that wonderful word of confidence. They have no doubt after the first meeting that the company is going to turn around. No doubt whatsoever, except the ones that are absolutely rigid. And every time you say something, they say that's been tried before, that didn't work before.
Constraint thing.
We tried that, and it's not going to work. And if you can't convince them to lean in, then the only alternative is that they work somewhere else.
For an incumbent leader who has to turn around their own company, is the dynamic really different? Because someone's not coming in, they are the ones who are incumbent, having to turn around their own company.
They have to change on a dime. They have to look different. They have to sound different. They have to almost incorporate acting skills.
How can they still be leader?
By leading rather than by managing.
But they won't have, and I dare say the word confidence, people won't have confidence in the leader that's led them into the Box Canyon.
If the leader starts taking the actions that they should have taken prior to getting them into trouble, they can act and look differently. They can start by admitting that they made mistakes and being a little humble and saying, it is my fault that we're here, but it's my responsibility to get us out of here.
So the first things that come out of their mouths is mea culpa.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not COVID. It's not climate change. It's not that caused these problems. It's me. I'm the leader. I'm responsible. And I've recognized my responsibility, and it's hit me really hard, and I know I've made mistakes. And this is my method of rectifying those mistakes.
And from your experience, those that have to turn around their own company, how many of those companies do turn around?
A relatively small percentage, maybe 20 or 30%. It's very hard for people to make that U-turn, that complete change. They are who they are. I've seen it happen. I've in fact advised companies where I haven't been in, where I've been speaking to the CEO of the company. I didn't want to go into those companies, but I wanted to help. So I've advised the CEO on the methodology of how they can help themselves and help their companies.
One philosophy you've got, which I find really interesting, is that people have this perception that people go in, people like you go in to turn a company around, and you have to stand proud and be this noble leader. But you have this philosophy of you've got to take yourself to the far end of the company and do the worst job, as well as leading the company. Just talk me through that.
It's to show that you're human. It's to show that you're not hierarchically the top of the ladder, that you're willing to do anything. And immediately you show people that you're willing to do anything, you'll take on the toughest job. When I bought the company in Scotland, that was really the genuine black hole of Calcutta. It was the worst shop floor I'd ever seen.
This is a manufacturing company.
This is in manufacturing, yeah. They manufactured components for the computer industry for Silicon Glen, which is Silicon Valley in Scotland. And when I took over that, when I was looking at the company to buy it, I got so excited on the simple principle. I had no way of making it worse. Whatever I did was going to be an improvement.
Okay, so what job did you do that was so grim?
I asked the shop floor representative in our cleanup that we did, which was renovating the company in a 3-day period, to pick for me the worst job that they could find. and to get me a pair of extra large overalls. And they were to pick the job. Whatever the job in the cleanup was the worst, the one that no one wanted to do, I was willing to take.
Brave guy. And the job was?
Cleaning out this 8-foot pit that hadn't been cleaned out in probably 10 years. There was about 3,000 pounds of material that had to be picked out with a fork and gloves, and dirt and all sorts of garbage had been thrown in there, and no one had cleaned it out, and it smelled absolutely outside of mask. I had my overalls, I had my thick gloves, and I just went at it, and I started peeling off pieces of metal. And
How long did it take?
2 days.
Is that time well spent? I thought time was of the essence when you're turning around a
No,
company.
it was time extremely, because people saw I completed the job. If I didn't complete the job, then fine. He just wanted to do it for show. I wanted it to be the cleanest machine, the best area around there to show that I had pride in what I was doing.
Do you remember what people said when you did it?
They were stunned. The previous management wouldn't go anywhere near the shop floor. And here I was in a pit up to my shoulders in metal filings. And I think it was really pivotal, as this was going to be my company, because I bought the company, to set the standard. This wasn't just a turnaround. This was actually an acquisition turnaround where I was going to be the owner at the end of it.
Slightly different dynamic.
So I had a little bit longer runway to work with. I wanted to really show that I was fully committed and wouldn't back down from anything.
Do you have to also be a little bit mischievous? In other words, come left of field when they don't see it coming.
Yes, I think very early on you have to decide whether you're going to be managed or you're going to manage them.
Yeah.
And if you're utterly predictable, you're very easy to manage. So what you have to do is to come out of left field, do things that are unusual. Like one of the consulting jobs, I was very suspicious about the company I'd been brought in to analyze, and something just seemed wrong about it. So I turned up one day early. And
The day before you were supposed to
the
turn.
day before I was supposed to turn out.
Right.
And what they had done, there was a subsidiary of a Belgian company. And when they knew the management team was coming over from Belgium, they'd all bought themselves Cadillacs, brand new Cadillacs on the company tab
In a failing company.
in the failing company.
Right.
And so when the management came over there, they would bring their wives' cars in. And so no one ever got to see the Cadillacs. But I turned up a day early, and they hadn't had a chance to put their toys away. And so I learned that was a really good technique to just do the unusual.
Yes, that must have endeared you to them.
It established that I wasn't to be, that I couldn't be controlled, that I was going to be one step ahead of them. What I found the way to extract information from people is to give them comfort that the consequences of telling the truth won't be fatal to them. So I can create a sort of confessional where they're comfortable of telling me the truth. And if I anticipate what the problem is, for instance, I can tell the chief financial officer that I think the inventory is overstated by $2 million and we need to write off $2 million. His immediate reaction almost every single time was, wow, someone really knows the truth.
At last I can tell.
At last I can tell. Before I'd been told I couldn't tell. It would have meant that we had breached the bank covenants. It would have meant that we had really serious problems.
So this is a case of the priest in the confessional, one of those hats you're wearing.
Yes.
And when you go in, is it usually the CFO, the chief financial officer, who's the first lining up to go in the confessional?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because they've been holding this house of cards up. They've been moving numbers around. They've been using every accounting trick. And accounting has unbelievable number of tricks under what we call GAAP, which is Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, FASB, which are the Financial Accounting Standards Board. And there are all sorts of things you can do with numbers. You can accrue them, you can defer them, you can move them around, and you can take a real serious situation and make it actually look fairly benign. And that's where they think actually their skill set is. They actually think that that's
To manipulate.
makes them a really good financial person, that they can take something that's not very good and make it sound very appetizing.
And present that to the incumbent leader.
Leader and to the shareholders and the stakeholders and the bank and the customers and the suppliers. So they look at this juggling act, this financial juggling act, as being one of their major attributes.
Who was it? I think it was Walter Scott who said, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave
When we practice to deceive. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, and you think the CFOs got their
Yes,
to their neck in it.
I mean they feel that that's their job, and when you disabuse them of that and say that's fine if a company was making massive profits, you want to reduce them and move them around, but you're on death's door, and we've got to find out exactly how bad this is.
Who do you want to meet the most in that company? One would assume it would be the leader of that company. Is that the most important person you want to talk to?
No. I found the most interesting and the most valuable person is to ask who has been with the company longest, who is the company historian, who has seen all the phases, even phases when the company was doing very well. And most of these companies can be 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. They wouldn't have lasted 50 years. At some point, they were doing okay. In fact, sometimes they're doing very well. So the person who's been there the longest will let you know that 20 years ago, everything was fine. And then we stretched the marketplace. We had a very good business at X size, and we tried to make it bigger.
In those early steps in the book, what are the most important things you've got to focus on?
First, the establishment of your leadership position, whether you're the previous incumbent or whether you're someone new.
Leadership comes first.
Leadership absolutely comes first, because that creates the listening platform. No one will listen to someone who they don't believe is a leader. You also have to provide the word we've talked about quite frequently, confidence, so people can lean on you. They now know that there is at least someone who has the belief in the future possibilities of the company. You have to remember that prior to coming in, this is a depressing place. This is a depressing environment. No one has shown any light. No one has shown any confidence. It's one crisis after another. And in some ways, people are almost shell-shocked. They've just had too many hits.
So it's a lot about the optics rather than the practical stuff.
The optics and the practical
go together.
And actually, even in the tone of your voice.
Yeah.
If I was to go in and say, I'm really confident that things can work out, I wouldn't want to follow someone. If I come and say, I'm really confident, I've looked at this company, I think it has a spectacular future. There's going to be some really tough things that we're going to have to do. But in the long run, this is going to be a world-class company. And people, wow, this is the first good news that we've heard.
And there'll be others who'll say, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. And that's great. They stick their heads up over the parapet. And if they keep on saying that, then we'll do the part in the Henry V speech where you can take your crowns of convoy and your passport and leave.
So you're already beginning to weed out.
Yes. And people self-identify incredibly quickly. They don't know how to play the game. Now, there are occasional Machiavellian types who are incredibly enthusiastic. How pleased we are to have you here. And behind the scenes, they're undermining everything you do.
So they're just a little bit too enthusiastic.
Too enthusiastic. They just, you're the promised, you're the promised man, and everything's going to be okay, and we're so pleased to have you.
But how can you figure that out so quickly? Because you say speed is of the essence, yeah? But it takes time to know what people are really like, the internecine
It actually
politics.
doesn't. It actually
Is it
doesn't.
not?
People are very, very demonstrative, and maybe because of the experience of doing it so many times and meeting so many people in these situations, you can actually start seeing characteristics over and over again.
This is one of those hats you're wearing where you're a psychoanalyst.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you're assessing, you're doing a rapid assessment. You don't have time to do a detailed assessment. So you have to learn to see things that other people don't see. When they come into the meeting, where they sit, how they sit. Do they come in with something to write on, to take down? Do they slump in their chair? I'm watching everything.
I remember when we had a boss come into our company many, many years ago, a couple of decades ago, and he would just go to people individually. He wouldn't call a big meeting. He'd call maybe the big meeting and say, "Hi, here I am." But then he'd go I guess he'd delve into the huge politics and the gossip mill that is a place of work. But that takes time.
Yeah, this is why I'd get them all in at once and just make. Now, I was not perfect with my assessment, but I made an assessment. I had something to build on, and I got 90% of it right. Sometimes the strongest Jeremiahs were actually turned out, the doubting Thomases turned out to be convinced. We have a state called Missouri in the United States, and it's called the show me state, where they don't trust that. You show me. You got to show me what's going on. And so it's also a sign of intelligence where they don't know someone who's come in. You got to prove it to me. You kind of learn to read people. And it's, having done it for 17 years with so many different companies, one of the things I was really surprised at was when I didn't do it for 30 years and I went back, almost the same cast of characters was in the same meeting. And I kind of seen it before. It was sort of as...
And I know when you go into a company, it's a bit like when you're playing golf. You know, you see the ball, that's where it lies, and you've got to hit it where it lies. So you've got to deal with the hand you've got in
Yes.
terms of the people within the company. At what point would then bring people from outside and then say, you're out, you're in, to have a greater say on how the company goes?
I actually never brought anybody in
Really? You dealt with the people
with the
in the
people
company?
in that I had.
And that worked.
Yes, I was I always was absolutely shocked at the depth of capability in a company that wasn't used. What I found in every company was there was incredible reservoir of capability in that company, a massive reservoir. And all it needed to be was found. And
But that takes time, surely.
less time than you would think, a lot less time. And the more I did, the faster I got.
And do you go in on your own, or do you have a lieutenant, or as you guys would say, a lieutenant, with you to be the second pair of eyes?
No, I'm totally on my own, and I had one person to take notes at the meeting and to listen to suggestions and write those up, because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything that someone had said when they made a recommendation.
Because usually when a company is going to the wall, they bring in teams of people.
Yes. Wrong
That's the wrong
approach.
thing to do.
Wrong approach.
Why is one person so much better than the team? Why are you so much better than the rest?
Speed and having done it before and experience. And being able to work at my pace without having to discuss. I've always been a loner, and I love working on my own. I don't play well with other children.
You talk to people. Who are the most important people you want to talk to? One would assume it's the leader.
I found I got the quickest and best information on why the company was in the state it was at, not from the CEO, who would give all sorts of justification of why he had failed or she had failed. It was from the person who'd been in the company longest. And I had a wonderful situation where I found this person who'd been working for a company I'd been brought in for 40 years. And he was down in the warehouse. And he'd kept an entire diary of all the things that had happened in the company.
So he's the company historian.
Archivist. The archivist. And he read through the book to me. And he said, at this particular point, this is where it started to go off the rails.
So you will seek out that longer serving
Yes.
employee,
Yes.
thinking that they're a treasure trove.
They have knowledge that no one else has.
They also might be the most cynical, laziest, keeping their head down, which is why they're the longest serving employee.
No, that's more an English trait.
Oh, Michael, you know that's true. It could easily be
No,
true.
it never happened that way. These were always people, if you create the confessional, they want to tell. They may have got cynical because no one listened to them. But you create a different platform for them to be to communicate with. And I found 100% of the longest employees that I spoke to when I first went into companies produced an absolute wealth of information. And this is on the first day. So everybody said, how can you know so much about the company at the end of the first day? And it was because I went to the person who had the most knowledge, who'd been there longest, and they gave me information that no one else in the company actually could give me.
And you do this with every company?
Every single company.
And it brings up the same treasure trove? Really?
Every single time. Now, I may have just been lucky, but in this particular case, I found it extraordinary. Now, you have to create the right receptivity. You have to allow people to give their gripes and get things off their chest.
But the trouble is, it takes time to earn trust. I don't know how you get that trust in such a short time.
I'm non-threatening. The fact I've even asked to have a conversation with them as the very first person gives them a sense of immense pride. He's coming to me first. And I've just found it's my own technique. It may not, there may be one company I go to, it'll be an absolute rascal in that position. But I found that they can see change and when it happened, and they can see the root cause.
So initially what you do when you go in is you talk to people.
Yes. First, I do a lot of wandering around just on the first day. I just kind of look at the lay of the land. But when we start having the company meetings, I make sure there's no more than 10 people. Mm-hmm. There's someone who is writing everything down, and that no one has their supervisor in there. And we mix up as many of the job categories in that room as possible.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're getting them to break out of their silos.
Right. And these people then describe to these people what their jobs are. And in many cases, people are amazed that these people work so hard. And even sometimes they recognize that what they're doing badly impacts these people, and they have to work far harder because what they did was not done correctly, and this person then has to correct what they didn't do.
So is that silo mentality a major feature of the companies that you have to turn around?
Yes. I mean, people actually very rarely, in fact, they were told, this is not your department, this is not your responsibility, stay in your lane and don't go outside your lane.
And is that a deliberate policy, or is it just evolves?
I think it evolves. I think it's encouraged from the top. I think there's a great fear at the top of
command and control. Yeah.
Well, a great fear at the top that there could be an insurrection. And if you keep people siloed and you basically keep them contained and they're staying within their section, they won't have the ability to criticize other things. So I think there's always this kind of management by containment and keeping people in their place.
I can appreciate you think that with the big companies, but you have to turn around little companies as well. That's not going to be in place. They're just not big enough.
They can be. I mean, it's a lot of the people in the office had never been down to the warehouse. A lot of the people in the warehouse had never been. When I first had my company meetings, I have them in the boardroom. And people come in with eyes wide open. They'd never been into the boardroom before. They actually felt a little uncomfortable. What am I doing here in the boardroom? And so there was, I try and mix things up. I'm a constant mixer to try and...
You're a disruptor.
Total disruptor.
Yeah.
And because I have to break everything up at that particular point, because that stops the overall sort of decline. I've got to break it up. I've got to change things. I've got to move things around. I've got to make people feel that things are different.
Are you doing this in days or weeks?
Depends on the size of the company.
Okay. Or a medium-sized company?
Medium-sized company, you can get a lot done in the first week. And the more you get done in the first week, and the faster you move, and more aggressively you move, the easier it is to turn around the company.
So did you ever have an instance where you had confronted a leader or a CFO or whoever, where it all got really pretty nasty?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, was there a leader who you just thought, they are out of here? I mean,
well, yes, I had one that I had been told that he had intimidated the employees, and there was a weekly sort of session where he would walk around the plant and hand out people's pay that had been deposited in the bank account. And in order to keep people sort of attentive, if he walked by your workstation, it meant you'd been fired.
Because he didn't give you the paycheck.
Because he didn't get the paycheck. And that was the indication that that was your last day. This was in an area of Scotland which had 18% unemployment. And I didn't believe it. So I hid behind one of the machines and watched and saw him do it. And at that point, we had a very quick and rapid dismissal. And I've very rarely done something that quickly, but this person was so malevolent that I wanted to excise him out of the country. He was a cancer.
And just wrapping this up, the physicality of the workplace, we'll visit that later, but do you walk the shop floor and just notice, I don't know, inventory that's been there forever,
Yes.
or
I
kit that's not there that should be there?
I've learned the observation of things. For instance, in inventory, I'd very simply take my hand and rub my hand across it. If there was dust on it, I knew it was non-moving inventory. It didn't matter what they told me.
The dust test.
The dust test. And I'd used the dust test in many companies where I was told all the inventory is moving fast, it's valuable, and I'd go out there and I'd run my finger, and to get a decent amount of dust, something has not moved for a year.
So we've seen in these early first steps, they're pretty straightforward. You're observing, you're gathering information. The next few steps, the next chapters are going to be pretty tough. Some would say pretty brutal. Am I right?
Yes, but every time I had to do significant reductions in force, which is a wonderful euphemism for just letting people go, I tried to do it with compassion, and I tried to do it in a way that showed people that this was a financial necessity. It wasn't their shortcomings. In any other circumstances, they would be a great employee, a great part of the team, but we were constrained by financial constraint that only allowed us to afford a certain number of employees.
Okay, the tough bit comes next. Mike, thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to The Art of the Turnaround. If you love this podcast, please like and subscribe. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at The Art of the Turnaround. You can follow Mike Dunlop on LinkedIn or his website, theartoftheturnaround.com. This podcast was produced by Cadence 3 Studios. Kate Waters was our producer. Alex Dunlop was the story editor. Spencer Matches was the projects editor. April Bricker was our editor-in-chief. Todd Arbuckle designed our show art. Andrew Kindred is our audio engineer. Benjamin Marks composed the music. The Art of the Turnaround is based on the book by Mike Dunlop and hosted by Alex Dunlop.